Good evening. We'd like to call the meeting of City Council held February 9th, 2021 to order. Are there any late items? No. There's no public input. We'll look at 4.1, adoption of the minutes. I need a mover and a seconder. That the minutes of the regular council meeting held January 26, 2021 be adopted. Any errors or omissions? All in favor? Opposed? None. General matters, there's no delegations or presentations tonight. On to unfinished business. 6.1 are draft SLIGA resolutions. And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Lois.
Thank you, Your Worship. So as you recall, a couple of weeks ago, I think it was the January 12th meeting, we brought to you the letter from SLIGA where one of the things they requested was any potential resolutions to their conference. And so the conversations that you were having at that meeting revolved around snow clearance, snow maintenance, and so the message that I took from that was that these were the sorts of draft resolutions you would be looking for to potentially submit to SLIGA. One of the things I'd like to emphasize is that this is merely my proposed draft at this point. Anything that goes forward would be council's resolution, so please do make any comment that you want. Feel free to rip them apart, say that I was in totally the wrong direction, whatever. Essentially, if you want any major changes, I'm totally happy to do complete rewrites on them. The next meeting is when you would need to make any final decisions, or if they're in if they're in a condition that you feel comfortable with them, then you could always resolve to pass them through to SLIGA tonight, if they're either how you want them to be, or if you would only like minor changes. So I will leave it over to Mayor and Council for any debate that you want to have.
So if there's room for minor change, there still is room for minor changes?
Your Worship, they can be changed as much as you like. You don't even need to submit these motions at all if you don't want to. But the only condition is that they need to be submitted by I think it's the 26th of February. So the meeting on the 23rd is the last time that you would be able to consider them. So if you consider on the 23rd, you probably wouldn't be able to request a total rewrite, but you can still.
And I think that's what I was meaning by the time they come back.
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't meaning that we needed to only do small changes. So, thank you. And can we have a motion on the table to discuss that council comment on and provide further direction to staff on the draft resolution? So we have mover and seconder, okay? And so discussion. Councillor Luck.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Lois, for putting these together. I think it's really good. I think it's really exciting that whenever we can put motions for SLIGA or even UBCM, hopefully we'll be able to do some in UBCM coming up as well. This is really exciting. I like them both. I think they're really good there. Obviously the all-terrain vehicles, I thought we could expand that a little bit more for all the year round, but you know what? I'm gonna go with this one, and let's see where we get with this one. There's no point trying to go too big. You know, I think this one's a really good one to really get us started on the whole ATV tourism piece and everything. So I'm very comfortable with this. Let's see where we go with this and what kind of headway we can make, and I'm really good with it. Thank you.
Councillor Bangu.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Thank you, Greg. You know, after reading this letter, this draft resolution, the thought occurred to me that I like it. I like it a lot, and I like it because it takes into consideration the concerns citizens have brought forward. And I appreciate that you incorporated citizen concerns into these resolutions. Thank you.
Councillor Richard.
Thank you. I think this addresses two major items, which is, of course, the arterial roads. But with the change to the ATVs, I know that this is a year of change with ICBC. So if they can make this amendment after the care plan comes into effect after May, I think it would be timely if it's discussed at UBCM. because right now the government is changing the Insurance Act. So, at least in BC. So maybe something can be worked out with certain parameters, and it'd be nice to get support from us from SLIGA anyway. So they would have some rules, obviously. I mean, there's a lot of little details that they would need to have from people, obviously, but some kind of safety precautions and whatnot. But I don't see why it couldn't be done, because other provinces seem to do that as well. Thank you.
Councillor Christopherson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just really appreciate the tone and the direction of both of these motions. They're addressing concerns that the citizens of Merritt have brought to our attention time after time after time, and it's, I think, taking it to SLIGA and hopefully on to UBCM just adds a little bit more credibility to what we're asking for, and I would encourage our city to keep advocating for this. I know the citizens of Merritt, and particularly on Nicola Avenue, will really appreciate this. So thank you very much.
Well, and I know that council, past and current, have talked to the Ministry of Transportation on this issue for a number of years, and we've had citizens come to us for a long time. So it's not as if we haven't lobbied individual, but this is the first time we've brought it to SLIGA with the hope of bringing the Southern Interior in on this as well, and ultimately to UBCM. So I'm happy with the wording. It has to be generic for anybody else to buy into it. So this is what we need. In terms of the ATVs, I lived in Kenora, Ontario, that was one of those towns that had, 17,000 population during the wintertime and 120,000 in the summer. And the wintertime, they had ATVs on their roads all over the place. And everyone just learned to respect each other. So I actually like this. I think it can be beneficial, especially for our seniors and our disabled individuals that actually need help in the wintertime. ATVs are available a lot more available than any other piece of equipment to help them out. And I think this is a really good start. And again, generic, so that we can pull in the Southern Interior and ultimately bring it to the province at UBCM. So I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. Bylaws 7.1, Official Community Plan Amendment. And again, we have staff. Mr. MacArthur, staff report.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this particular file is with regard to Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 2297 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 2298, which is the property at 2587 Forksdale Avenue. At the December 15th council meeting, council gave first and second readings to both amendment bylaws with an amendment of removing the proposed high-density residential R8 zone and replacing that with medium-density residential. That amended zoning proposal was then brought to public hearing on January 26th, and later that evening was given third reading by council. Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure has since provided approval for it on February 1st, and so we're now back here in front of council asking for final adoption.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Looks like we've exhausted some of those questions previously. So I need a mover and a seconder that council adopt Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 2297, 2020. And any debate on this? This will be your last chance. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. And that council adopt zoning amendment bylaw number 2298, 2020. I need a mover? Second? And any debate on this one? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Procedure bylaw number 7.2, procedure bylaw number 2300, 2021. And Mr. Lois, can you carry us through this again?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. So this is the long-awaited rewrite, or proposed rewrite of your procedure bylaw, which in various different forms has been about a year in the coming. So the existing procedure bylaw is something like, I can't remember, 10, 15 years old. It has a number of problems, and in the last several months in particular, it's, I would say, creaking under the weight of modern events. It is not well designed for the situations we find ourselves in at the moment, with things like electronic meetings, with the modern ways that we work as a municipality. There are a series of problems with the way that, say, committees and council meetings are set out in it that are somewhat contradictory or inexplicable. I think the existing committee policy that it refers to, for example, has twice as much notice required for committee meetings as is required for council meetings, and other fascinating things which probably crept in over time as people weren't noticing that much what impacts were being done. So essentially in last fall, I asked for your permission to spend a significant amount of time doing a complete rewrite of your procedure bylaw and a review of all your committee operations. And so the proposal that I'm bringing forward for you tonight is that if you take the steps forward with this new procedure bylaw, then at the next council meeting, I would bring a revised committee policy and notice of motion policy, and also a complete listing of all the committees which currently exist and their terms of reference and any proposed changes that would be made to those. The reason for that is that if you're going to adopt a new procedure bylaw, then we have to give public notice first, and that would take 2 weeks. So you can't do anything for this in the immediate interim. It'll be at least March before you can adopt any new changes to this. You can, of course, make any amendments that you want to this proposal. Some of the key changes that I propose are laid out in the bullet points in the report. Some of them, I think, are exciting and bold changes, although I appreciate that there might be some resistance. For example, I propose moving the official notice place from the glass cabinet outside this door, which is accessible for maybe 2 hours a day at the moment, to an online location at merit.ca, which will be accessible 24/7 around the world. Or as some people would say, you're putting it online, so this means people with computers can't see it. So there are definitely pros and cons. I like to think that it makes for clearer principles of debate, more easily readable and comprehensible rules on how things work. It would, for the first time, set out a notice of motion policy, where I know that a lot of the time councillors want to bring policy ideas to council, but I would say over the last 6 months, they haven't gone as smoothly as they can, and I would like to have clearer rules in there to assist council in coming up with your ideas and helping arrange the proper time and scheduling to get them in front of council and be debated in the manner that you want. And then this would further changes to allow for online meetings and virtual participation. This would also tie in with, I've mentioned to you before in some of the recent finance meetings, proposed changes to our streaming services, which will be coming forwards in the late spring. So this will all tie in together with that. I hope that the bylaw is frankly clearer than this little explanation has been. If you have any questions or comments or feedback, then of course I am more than happy to answer any questions on why any of these proposals as they are, or any changes that you would like to talk about.
Are there any questions for Mr. Lois? Councillor Christopherson.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for doing all this work. And I think you kind of answered this question already, but I just want to make it crystal clear in my mind and perhaps others. This can be amended at a later date if necessary, I believe.
Yes, Councillor. So the proposal before you tonight is to give the first 3 readings to this bylaw and to then go to give the required public notice. We would not be able to do the public notice in time to consider this on February 23rd. So the earliest this could possibly be adopted is March the 9th. So you could either request amendments on the 23rd, or on the 9th you could rescind 3rd reading and then propose amendments to it. So there's public consultation will be a thing, and if as a result of that you want to make any changes, you're absolutely free to do so. And of course, as a bylaw, it can be amended by bylaw anytime in the future as well if there are things that aren't working out.
Why I'm asking is sometimes when you read it even for the 90th time,
Yep.
it doesn't really sink in until you're actually practicing it. And then you go, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that. So I'm assuming that this is some kind of a working document that hopefully is absolutely perfect.
I would say
But life often isn't, and
Absolutely.
so as we go through and actually follow what is being said, sometimes what we thought was crystal clear isn't. So
this is definitely not set in stone. You would always be able to change it. It's perhaps set in clay.
but not cooked yet. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
A reminder, this is question period, not debate period. Okay. Councillor Bangu.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Greg. Will the city notices still remain in the places that they are, and in addition to placing them online? Thank you.
Through your worship to Councillor Bangu, there is a clause in there which says, I think for at least public hearings, that staff will certainly endeavour to place physical notices, for example, in the glass cabinet and potentially in, say, the doors at City Hall as well. But the community charter requires that we list a official notice place, and my proposal is that we move that online to where it could be accessed 24/7.
Councillor Richard.
Looking at this, my only question was, I noticed that there was a proposal to change the council meetings to 6 p.m. on the 2nd and 4th Tuesday, which is similar to what we have now. But how are we going to have our committee of the whole meetings? Are they going to have a set time in the bylaw as well? Or is that just going to be where we set them in the November in the year ahead?
Through your worship to Councillor Etchart, there isn't a proposed set time for committee of the whole meetings in the bylaw. I think at the moment we're typically calling them as and when they're required. So some of them take place at, say, 2 in the afternoon. Some of them have been at 6 in the evening. There was one, I think, at 12:30 a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. So the committees of the whole tend to be more all over the place, depending on when.
Loosey-goosey.
Yeah. And, okay.
Do you have a follow-up question for that?
Oh, I will later, but for now, this is good enough.
Well, later is not going to happen, so we're going to debate later, but we're not going to be, this is the time for asking questions if you need.
Well, it's not really a question as much as it is a comment, so.
Okay,
I'll shut
you
my
can
button
save
off,
that.
but thank you for that.
And just to clarify, this is a public notice. This is not for a public hearing. This is only to let people know that this is on the agenda for whenever it is.
Yes, Your Worship. So the requirement under the community charter is that we place public notice that we are considering changes to the procedure bylaw. There isn't a requirement to hold a hearing on it, but of course in the next couple of meetings on both February 23rd and March 9th, if any member of the public wishes to send in public input about the proposed bylaw, they are more than free to do so.
I'd like us to make that announcement when we do put out the notice, because it is a time change, and that is the one thing that will really affect the public. A lot of the rest of this is our own internal workings, but that will definitely affect the public. And
Your Worship, if I may, one of the other requirements of the community charter is that we, when we set the annual schedule of meetings, which you did in November, that we advertise this so that the public know when the meeting is going to take place. So of course we advertise that for 7 o'clock because at the time that was the time in the bylaw. So we would also re-advertise those in order to make sure that people absolutely know, because of course we wouldn't want people to, yeah.
thank you for that. And Councillor Christopherson.
Just a quick one. We have generally had closed sessions before the regular meeting, and sometimes we have them after the regular meeting. Would that be addressed in this, or is that still optional?
To Councillor Christopherson, this is essential. For about the last year now, the way we've been doing it is holding closed sessions at the end of regular meetings, whereas for I don't know how many years before that, the normal practice was to hold closed meetings before the open meetings in the boardroom. I think as staff at the moment, we feel that it's generally better to hold the closed sessions at the end, because that way you can conduct all the public business and then exclude the press and the public and continue for however long it takes you to debate the closed items. There are a couple of downsides to this. For example, if you're debating committee appointments, then you then have to wait 2 weeks before you can actually make the appointments, whereas if you were having the closed meeting first, you could potentially do it just 5 minutes later. So I think we would, that isn't actually mentioned in this bylaw because I think we wanted to have flexibility, but I think as a general practice, we would anticipate continuing to hold them at the end unless council instruct otherwise.
Yeah, I only ask because it's not addressed in here, so there is flexibility. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I need a mover and a seconder that we give first reading to this procedure bylaw 2300-2021. I almost said and the second, but, and do we have any debate? Okay, I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. And I need a mover that council gives second reading to procedure bylaw 2300-2021. Seconder? And any debate here? I would like to mention that I think we should have a committee of the whole education session shortly after this so that we understand what our, got that? Good, thank you. So that we understand what's in our bylaws. So anybody have anything? And I keep looking at Councillor Richard because he said he had another statement to make. Councillor Richard.
Well, the main thing, like, it's nice that everything's addressed for procedure and time and whatnot, but lately, it's kind of hard when sometimes some of these meetings are all over the place, like literally all over the place. And sometimes people want to have input, especially when we have OCP changes and things like that. So I know that things come up and we have to schedule things, but even I think it's like nice to be consistent. Sometimes it's hard to have it on a Tuesday afternoon, and sometimes it's convenient for the staff, and it's maybe not convenient for all the councillors. Maybe for some it is, and maybe
Are we
for
talking
some
committees or council meetings?
for committee of the whole.
Okay, okay.
So it's nice to have a little bit of consistency because sometimes people want to attend. Maybe they want a live stream. Maybe people are at work. Changing it from 7 to 6. If we have enough notice, maybe people can adjust, maybe they're done, whatever the case may be, but that's my only concern is that being consistent and transparent, because sometimes we make it happen for ourselves, but I know that too much change is hard for people to adjust quickly, and that's my only concern. Because we've had a lot of changes, and I'm not a fan myself, but anyway, thanks.
I know with the committee of the whole, we do try to account for especially council's schedules. I know there's two of you that work full-time, and we do try to take that into consideration. Mr. Smith.
I really just want to acknowledge that I think that's a fair comment. There is more standardization that probably ought to happen in relation to committee of the whole meetings. What we would like to do, and I think what's been done historically, but changing needs and dynamics have kind of gotten us away from this. But ideally, the off Tuesday, so your first and third, as opposed to your second and fourth, you would save that same 6 o'clock time slot for a potential committee of the whole meeting, where sometimes we've gotten away from that. Is there are committee of the whole meetings that are very much council education focused, that aren't necessarily items that are imperative that the public is completely up to date or well informed on. Of course, they're always still meetings, but it's very much open meetings, but it's very much council focused. Whereas there's lots of meetings where I would take like the water one, for example, where there's going to be an expectation from the public that they have the opportunity to view that in the evening. And so it's very much public focused, and you want to have it in the evening time. But if there is a desire to kind of standardize this, so if there is a day meeting, it's happening at one time, and if there's an evening meeting, it's happening at another, I think that that's a fair and reasonable point, and something we can certainly work through with staff.
Okay. Did that satisfy you, Councillor Richard? Okay, thank you. And seeing no other questions, I think I'm in second reading and I need to call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None. And now we're giving third reading to procedure bylaw number 2300-2021. I need a mover. Seconder? And any question or debate here? Discussion? No? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. And that council instructs staff to provide public notice prior to considering adoption of procedure bylaw number 2300-2021. Thank you. And any debate here? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. Thank you. And on to new business. 8.1, Community Emergency Preparedness. Is Mr. Henderson here, or is one of you going to take this on? Mr. Smith, the staff report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this report is to support a Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, Flood Mitigation Planning Grant application. This is the same fund that the city has previously been successful in receiving funding for, to be able to compile and put together a LiDAR project, which, as an aside, I have had a conversation with the consultant, and I think that we're going to be getting that, fortunately not too much before freshet, right around freshet time, there's going to be, that project is going to be delivered. But in this instance, what we're looking at is to put forward an application regarding a plan to upgrade our wastewater treatment plant to be able to better accommodate flood level flows through the city of Merritt. One of the things that we've experienced, and you'll see it in the report, is that in 2017 and 2018, and even in 2020, even though we didn't see so much overland flooding, the higher groundwater levels during freshet create for greater groundwater infiltration on our system. And when it comes down to it, our system as a whole is capable of accommodating up to about 5,400 cubic meters of water coming into the system, wastewater coming into the system each day. Now, our average is around 2,400, and even during like peak times when groundwater levels are lower, we creep into the 3,000s, but we have plenty of capacity for kind of ordinary day-to-day demands on our system, even peak demands. It is the groundwater infiltration that causes the greatest issue. And so one of the first problems that we run into is when you start seeing greater groundwater infiltration, we need to run something called an overland bypass to basically prevent raw sewage overflow into our wastewater treatment plant. So that is one of the kind of first technical hurdles that we run into, and we will need to implement that somewhere around the 5,400 cubic meters per day number. Now, that is not, I don't want to oversell the degree of that problem, but it's not a good long-term solution to need to regularly go to overland bypasses in order to be able to process kind of an amount of water that we end up seeing most freshettes now. The second problem, and this one might be a greater technical challenge, is we have a gravity-fed siphon that runs from our actual wastewater treatment plant into the rapid infiltration basins that are in the Collettville area. And because it's gravity-fed, there is a finite amount of water that we can wastewater that we can push through to our RI basins, which is where the final processing happens, and the water is ultimately discharged down through the ground as part of a natural process. It's kind of the safest way of discharging any processed wastewater. And so we can do about 233 cubic meters per hour on that, but again, that brings you into this 5,000-ish number. We can't push any more through than that. So what we end up seeing is when we have greater flows coming from the wastewater system, we end up taking admittedly processed sewage, but it goes into the river in accordance with our operating permits. It's not illegal doing it, but it's not an ideal case scenario once again. The other problem is we just end up having a number of alarms and managing that system. I don't know if any of you will remember in 2018, there was also a sewer backup in one of our areas, and we had to put out a fairly serious notice saying, residents, we need you to dial back your wastewater, just because there was a real risk of overrunning the system. And when we were at that, we were actually closer to the 9,000 plus cubic meters per day number. It's just not something our system is capable of handling. So when it comes down to it, what we're putting forward is some potential upgrades to be able to better manage groundwater infiltration and improve our capacity to handle these flows regardless of whatever the freshet conditions may bring.
Thank you. Any questions for our staff? I have some questions. We also have, I guess it's a question, have we had a better way to manage from 2018 till now? Because from what I understand, we're doing a better job of managing the water from the lakes to the wastewater treatment plant. And I'll let you continue that.
Far better. And I will say commendation goes to the Public Works team. They learned a lot from 2017. And in 2017, there was not processed sewage, but raw sewage that went into the river. Problem. Like that one is a problem. And learned from it, developed better overland bypass systems. We've implemented that successfully in a worse flood year in 2018, and so we didn't see raw sewage overflow there. But I will say that while we're getting better, you can't change the infrastructure that's in the ground, and so we're always going to be hamstrung by that infrastructure during that freshet period. So we see this as something that will give us a plan that will ultimately allow for larger grant applications to be able to build out whatever said plan indicates.
And at this point, I also want to do a little brag out for staff who have learned how to manage this system better. And in 2020, we flowed more water through the system than in any previous year. On the other hand, we didn't have any of these issues going off because we managed the flow a lot better. So that was just a shout out to staff. And no other questions to staff? Is it your question to staff? Councillor Fair. Oh, sorry, I've missed somebody in here.
So would this plan involve expanding the water treatment plant, the physical area of it?
It could. Ultimately, it will be the creation of a master plan, and the primary aim is going to be the flood mitigation components. But at the same time, by increasing our ability to pass flows, it will potentially allow for, ultimately, whatever plan is going to do should be set for Merit's long-term build-out as well, so we can make sure that we're not needing to come back and do anything separately afterwards. So I think the answer is maybe. It'll definitely address the flood concerns, and it may involve some form of expansion. But in terms of expansion of the footprint, I think that it would largely be within the works yard that already exists, if there is any potential expansion there.
Okay, thank you.
My apologies, Councillor Etchart.
Really, the only question that I had was, at least having this plan, then this would probably give us more chances to make a plan for capital improvements later if there's any grants available. So it just, why wouldn't we apply for 150,000 of grant funding for something that we're going to need eventually? It's 60 years old. Typically, anything that involves water at the age of 60 is breaking. And
Is there a question in there?
no, just wondering if we have everything that we need, just approval to go ahead.
Yeah, I think that you hit it on the head with what the long-term plan is. There probably are some capital upgrades that are required, but it's one of, actually, I'm going to give kudos to council on this one. You guys have been very much encouraging staff to operate from long-term plans, and when it comes to making changes, we don't want to make them ad hoc, a little fix here, a little fix there. We want to say, let's see what the whole wastewater treatment plan is, put it in the context of potential growth in the city of Merritt, and then identify capital plans from there. So you hit it on the head for why it would be used, and ultimately it will be necessary for future grant applications.
Yeah, it seems like a necessary piece, so thank you.
And that brings us to our debate and a motion that says that council directs staff to apply for the CEPF Flood Mitigation Planning Grant for the wastewater treatment plant master plan, and that council support the project and commits to any associated ineligible costs or overruns. And debate. Councillor Bangu.
Thank you, Mayor. Any ideas of any projected overcosts or what that might look like, if that's even a concern? Thank you.
That would have been a question for staff. And Mr. Smith, can you answer that?
Absolutely, Your Worship. So the quote that we've received, we anticipate that the estimated cost for this is going to be $88,170. We fully anticipate, because that number does have some contingency in it, that we would not see cost overruns. But in the event that it happened, we would absolutely bring that forward to council. But at this point, we wouldn't anticipate any cost overruns with this project.
And thank you for answering the question.
Okay. Councillor Fair.
Yeah, my comment is just that, as Mr. Smith was speaking of earlier, it's great to see this going into a long-term master plan to address infrastructure. So I think that's something we'll be grateful for in decades to come.
Thank you. Councillor Christopherson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a comment that I really, really appreciate staff doing this kind of work on behalf of the citizens of Merritt. For too long, we haven't looked far enough into the future, and infrastructure is pretty vital to Merritt. So just kudos to staff for doing all of this for us. Thank you.
Infrastructure that also all over needs a lot of work. Yeah, we're aware. Any other comments? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor White? Thank you. Okay, that was unanimous. Thank you. And 8.2, approval of the 2021 grant in aid applications. And Mr. Strang, you're the staff on this, so.
Thank you, Your Worship. This one is going to be a little bit of musical chairs here. We've got a few different recommendations that are going to come up through this process. For the first two, we'll need all of council to vote on it, and then various members after that point. So this is the 2021 grant and aid. The grant and aid policy was revised in 2019, and the grant and aid was specified at $50,000 per year in that revised plan. This was intended to provide a cap, but the wording was fairly strict in that grant and aid shall be $50,000 per year, and I guess didn't envision a scenario where in a COVID year, especially with grants in kind, we wouldn't have that amount of $50,000 per year. Even you know, applications for that much. So recommendation 1, we're going to recommend that the policy be changed, just 2 more words. The amount of the budget will be up to $50,000 instead of $50,000, just to provide a little more budgeting flexibility there.
I'd probably treat that one independently.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think in order to proceed, we need to call a question and vote that particular one in order for 2 to 6 to hold.
Okay, can I have a mover and a seconder? That council look at changing our policy to, instead of will be 50,000, to up to 50,000? And are there any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Will this take effect immediately, or?
That's why we have to do it now, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Bangu, through the Mayor. Yes, the intent was for it to take effect immediately. In the draft budget that was presented previously last week, the amount carried in the draft budget was $40,000, and then we discovered, of course, this policy needed to be amended for that. So we've proceeded with this application as if it was the amount in the draft budget. So yes, it would take effect immediately, making the draft budget the correct number of $40,000 in total. It does leave a remaining amount after, which we can deal with later, but yes, it would.
And I have a question also for staff. Don't we try to avoid numbers like this within our procedural policy?
Yeah, that one's on us. That's all I have to say.
Okay,
Correct. You are good call.
okay, thank you. So do we have any debate on this? Okay,
Your Worship, can I turn it down a little bit? Are you guys doing okay? I'm just sweating. It's 24.
yeah. I was feeling kind of comfy. So, all in favor? Opposed? In favor? That was unanimous? And opposed, none. So, we've got the policy changed. Now
Perfect.
we can move to,
Thank you, Your Worship. So we'll go through recommendations 2 through 6 here. Just a bit of a precursor. The policy from 2019 was a fairly major overhaul in terms of the grant and aid process, in terms of what the maximum amount per organization, and what types of grants would be considered by council. There wasn't much change this year. The only change that we did push through is that applicants looking for $1,500 or less aren't required to submit financial statements or an organizational budget because most of these smaller applicants, of course, weren't in the position to provide them in the first place. So we were hoping to encourage more smaller organizations to apply and therefore distribute the money over more local nonprofits. This year, that was not the case. Unfortunately, we didn't have a ton of applicants. We did touch base with all the applicants from 2021 from 2020 who did not submit in 2021, just to make sure that there weren't communication issues, and they all confirmed that they did in fact not submit grants for various reasons. So our total at this point is $35,580 in requests, and an amount of $4,420 is basically unspoken for, even if all of those are improved. We can talk, or recommendation 6 is what exactly to do with that excess money. And we can talk about that in resolution 6, where exactly that goes, but it's up to council to decide on a line item for that money, or just not allocate it anywhere.
Council.
Sorry?
Council, goes to council.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, there was some applicants who, we did suggest in here that it would go to council discretionary, because there was some applicants who didn't file who, for example, the Merit Otters, who weren't going to have a swim club, but maybe they were. So we may see something from these local organizations later on in the year, depending upon the current health guidance. Not to get ahead of myself here, so.
Can I ask one question?
Absolutely.
For the last year applicants, there's a requirement that they all did their reporting and everything is all in order. Has that happened?
Yes, I have touched base with everyone for their 2020, at least all of the applicants from 2020 who reapplied in 2021.
Okay. And does that not apply to the other ones either?
It would apply to the other ones, however, the policy is phrased as if you don't file your 2020 report, then you don't qualify for funding in 2021. So by the logic of it, I guess there's no stick to wield in that particular case. But when I was going through, I was basically checking for applicants in 2021.
But because it's a COVID year, they may need to carry over some funds, but we really don't have anything in our policy that says, let them do a request for a carryover if it's needed.
So we did, Your Worship, we did have a couple organizations, Merit Dance Connection comes to mind, where they had a grant in kind last year for rental of a facility. They were not able to use that, and they phoned me and asked if they could carry it over. I told them that there's not really a carryover provision, as you said. It is a yearly budget process, so it is X amount of dollars per year. We've kind of established this cap in the procedure of $50,000 per year. If there's a carryover, it would be over that $50,000 a year, so they understood that and of course reapplied for this year. Most of those, the people that I've talked to who weren't able to capitalize on their kind of grant in kind, the events just didn't happen last year. So we had a few of those for sure.
Okay. I'd like staff to think about that process for the next time around, because this was COVID year and it was kind of odd, so we wouldn't have it in our policy, but let's clear that up for the future if it does happen again. Mr. Smith.
So just to help us understand, would it be the intent that in a non-COVID year, council would want or be okay with carryovers?
It depends on the applicant, what the report looks like. I mean, it depends on a number of factors.
You want at least the option available to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know that it would necessarily preclude it as is, but you'd want it allocated still for that. We can talk about it.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's absolutely
There's a
fair.
mechanism that we can do that and just separate it out
Yeah.
into a different category for sure. Absolutely. Okay.
Sorry for the interruption.
No, not at all. That's what I'm here for, answering questions. So the voting list has been split into category A through D to make recusals easier to administer. I'd been using the wrong word earlier, and Greg thoughtfully corrected me. Council this might get tricky if we have, in a year where we have a large slate, where it's over the total, but this year it should be fairly easy if individual grants get changed. So council can elect to approve the full amount that's in each category, category A, category B, C, D. They can amend the amount, approve a partial amount, or basically do whatever they want if they would like more information from the, I'm trying to think. Usually if they want more, if council would require more information from the actual nonprofit, If the nonprofit isn't in attendance, then they don't get that opportunity. We do have to keep in mind that they cannot attend. I've
Yeah.
made that clear with all the nonprofits, and so we do have the opportunity. We don't have to pass this meeting if there are clarifying questions. We could go actually back to them for a round of questions if that is required. Okay.
So can we take each organization in all of us together, so none of us have to get up at the first
Yeah,
little bit?
so category A is going to be the full slate here. And I'm not sure what detail you want me to walk through. I should make a note as well. I do have a note in the presentation here. In 2000, I think it was last year, sponsorships got split out. I was looking through the documentation last year, the year before. We've only received one sponsorship request this year, but again, as I noted earlier, I would anticipate if health restrictions change somewhat,
Yeah.
we'd start to see a few more of those for events and whatnot. We have reduced in the budget the sponsorship money to $7,500 for the budget for the year. Last year was $15,000. And that will be brought forward at a separate point in time. So none of the sponsorship applications are going to be brought into this particular meeting.
Okay, and does, in the blue section, section A, does anybody have any questions? Did you have a different comment? Councillor Bangu?
No, I answered, my question was answered.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So do we want to do them one at a time? Let's take Nicola Valley Arts Council so that we're all on the same page instead of going all over the map. They're requesting $2,500 on a program budget of $5,000. Anybody have questions? Or are you ready to vote? Do you want it for
Your
each
worship,
category?
if I could suggest, we may have a staff question period where we'll go through all the blue ones, not one by one, but if you have questions on any of the blue ones, I'd answer them as best as I could. And then you can certainly vote as a slate if that's agreeable to everyone.
Did you have a presentation for us as well? Or was that
Yes.
on a same issue?
Oh, right, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Kind of forgot about that.
You want me to do it for you?
Yeah, hang on a second. I actually forgot that I made a PowerPoint for it. Did it? I attached it as a PDF. Oh, there.
That's why we've got them in hard copy.
My apologies. Yeah, that's fine. We can do it this way.
Control plus on this old ghetto.
Yeah, so grant and aid timeline, we kind of went through that already. Requests for applications were in November. January, I went back to a few organizations for additional information. The list got made after December 16th, and here we are today. The voting process, as you can kind of see, we've talked through that, A, B, C, D. The historical numbers, I did include those in your package just to kind of see, you know, it was very, very clear that this was an off year for sure, both in number of applicants and total dollar value approved for, but last year was actually down quite a bit as well. So the applicants in, actually, yeah, let's do this. The applicants in category A, we should vote through first. Oh, there we go. Or discuss through first. Where are we? Where'd it go?
Go with this one here.
I can't handle this non-PDF thing.
Or maybe it's this one. That's pretty good. Embarrassing yourself.
My apologies.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. There we go. So yes, any applicants in blue, if there is any particular suggestions or comments or questions on those, now would be a perfect time for them.
Councillor Fair.
Yes, I'm maybe missing something with the construction of a washroom facility for the Nicola Valley Fall Fair Association. It looks like they're asking for $0. I just read
So
that.
I'm not sure. Can I see?
I
what
think,
that we have here?
last year, I think we had a $7,500 grant to
That's what we're
pay
looking.
for
So if
a
we,
design.
oh, that they were asking $0 last year or this year, are you saying?
Well, I'm seeing zeros across the board here.
So you might be looking a bit too far right. Are
That's
you in the
prior year
spreadsheet or
granted
the
aid,
PDF?
so their request amount here.
Oh,
is the
there's
7.
current, okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Now I
So
see
that
it.
means the amount they had last year has been carried forward to this year. Is that correct?
No, the fall fair itself did not have a request for last year. I believe there was a request in the Rodeo Association last year.
Just to clarify for everyone where this came from, that was in the category to the right, there's a 2020 approved and a 2019 approved to show you what the amounts were given to that organization in previous years.
Yeah.
It's the left side where, closer to where it says request name, type of grant, and then request amount.
Yeah.
So this year they are requesting $7,500, but what it's saying is in 2020 and in 2019, they did not receive any funding through this process.
So if I can help, that also, I'm confused, because we gave one of the two organizations on the rodeo grounds.
Yeah.
Mr. Anderson is going to,
I'll answer that one for you. Last year, the request was from the Nicola Valley Rodeo Association. It was a creation of a 5-year plan
okay,
for the growth of the NVRA. And that was a $7,500 grant. We had fronted them up 50% on that, $3,750, and the balance is on the final report, which we have not received yet. So that $3,750 will be carried forward and paid. Won't be part of this discussion
Okay.
here. It'll just be on the
and that's
books.
what I needed to clarify, was
Yeah.
it wasn't part of this discussion. This
No,
is
it's
totally
not
separate.
included here.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Missing a little bit of the history on it, but.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that particular washroom was $7,500. The total project cost is $235, and I believe they had about half of that covered, $20,000 funded internally and about 120-ish funded through TNRD.
130 from
Was it
TNRD.
130? Yes. So the initial $7,500 was targeted specifically towards an engineering study rather than the construction itself, and that's part of that $235.
And the rest, I believe, is going to be fundraised.
That was their plan, or that is their plan, yes.
And I think some in-kind was up in the air as well from the city. They haven't asked for in-kind from the city at this point, I don't think.
I haven't seen anything to that effect with them.
Okay, Mr.
Your
Smith.
worship, the in-kind work that is being proposed is the use of one of our staff to assist in project managing it. So that would be Sky McEwen through the recreation manager. He's been involved in that project. So if and when it does kind of get off the ground, that would be some of the in-kind contribution that was discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from anybody? I'll go on. The Merit Dance Society.
Yes.
They're asking for student tuition. Is that like a scholarship or a sponsorship?
So the Merit Dance Society actually has two items on there this year. The first item that they submitted was a grant in kind, which is an annual item for them. And as I noted previously, they were one of the ones that weren't able to capitalize on their grant in kind approval for last year. So they put through, again, for 2021, a grant in kind for use of the facility for their dance recital. They've also proposed something I don't believe I've seen in the last couple of years that I went through. It's a sponsorship for lower income families in a particular, with kids in a particular age group, to be able to attend a round of dance classes. So I believe it was about 6 or 8 dance sessions. I can call up the specific application, but it was about 6 or 8 dance sessions, the cost of the instructor and the facility. And they anticipated finding candidates for this program through School District 58, some recommendations. So they were kind of looking for an ability to do that for some lower income children.
And in my opinion, I think that's an amazing thing to bring to our community. My concern is not the issue, but whether it should be under grant and aid or under sponsorship, scholarship kind of area. Because it is to an individual, not to, I mean, ultimately, it'll go to help individuals. we're going to put this to Mr. Smith
Yeah.
or somebody.
What I would say is, I would consider this as funding a program that they are wanting to run. So instead of saying that it's funding the 8 individual students, it is allowing them to run a program that would
Okay.
ultimately invite students to be a part of it. So I think it is appropriate under the grant and aid heading. Could you make it fit under just about anything? Probably, but I certainly would say it's not inappropriate here under this heading.
Okay, I put that way, it makes complete sense. I'm not sure who is next. Councillor Etchart.
So when we went over this information last year, and we were talking about sponsorships, I thought we also had discussed capping those sponsorships for sports teams at limits of, say, $500 and $1,000. I mean, I could be wrong, but we had talking about groups and whatnot. So I think that the reason that this would be appropriate under the grant and aid is because we had specifically addressed sporting activities and games and groups, and there was limits discussed. So I think it's appropriate the way it is, but that's just me.
Councillor Bangu.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I agree with the Mayor. This is a wonderful program, a great idea, and I ask if, how can we get involved beyond just giving them money so that they can give it to someone else type of thing? Can we get some sort of name recognition or something along those lines? I know it's not a sponsorship, but is there anything that could be done? Thank you.
So a part of the grant and aid policy is the ability for the city to be recognized for that particular for that particular sponsorship, for sure. They do have to provide a report. I'm not sure that I can think of anything directly off the top of my head. Perhaps if they had some sort of advertising at their dance recital or something to that effect. I can certainly bring that up with the applicant. After this process, whether the applicant is approved or denied, I will be sending them a letter and chatting with them. So I can certainly bring that up. Or if you had a specific mention or visual statement that you had in mind, I can ask them as well.
I think our policy states that in number 13, the objectives, that the organizations must confirm that the city's contribution will be recognized publicly. That's it.
Certainly, yeah. The manner of that, if you have something that you'd prefer to see, I can certainly communicate that with the organization.
Councillor Bangu.
Yes, no, I don't have any particular communication. I just thought it was a good idea, and how can we get more involved in it? Thanks.
I'm envisioning you as the dance instructor right now. It's going well in my mind.
Councillor Richard.
I think that if all the groups that have received aid or assistance, the Dance Society is always receptive in sending emails and inviting us personally, a guest and council member X to attend. The appreciation level from them is there, and I think they recognize the assistance from the city on a regular basis. So I fully support this because they fully recognize the help that they receive from the city, and they appreciate it, and they invite us to every recital that they've had in the past. So great. Thank you.
I agree. They're innovative throughout this whole COVID period as well, which is just neat to see. Any other questions in the blue section? Okay. I'm assuming nobody wants to take one section out. I guess, how do we do that? If somebody has an issue with something, can they bring it up now?
We can do this a few ways. If everyone informally agrees that to proceed with the whole slate, we can do it that way. If we'd like to break out one particular item in the blue, we can vote on everything except, well, not we, but sorry, you can vote on everything except that item. And then you can vote on that item separately.
Councillor Bangu.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I've had the opportunity to review this grant and aid, and I'm comfortable voting on it as a slate if others are as well. Thank you.
Councillor White.
I just have one question. what the farmer's market would be requesting funds for.
I think that's in kind for the use of the parking lot.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor White, through the mayor. That is correct. They're using the parking lot as an in-kind donation.
Oh, okay. That's what I thought it was, but I didn't read it good enough.
That's because we need a magnifying glass to do it. We ask for all this information, so we get it all. Yeah, we just can't see it. Okay, I'm going to call the question. I need a mover and a seconder that council approve the grant and aid requests listed in category A on the attached Schedule A in the type, amounts, and payment timing indicated on the spreadsheet. Okay, and any other comments? All in favor? Opposed? None carried.
Thank you, Your Worship. For the second category here, we've had requests from one councillor to recuse himself. So if that could happen, we will proceed with the next two.
My apologies. Yeah. So, under section 100 of the Community Charter, Your Worship, can I please ask, before councillors leave the room, if they can please, this is a must, it's mandatory, declare what you believe let me read out the entire section. If a council member attending a meeting considers he or she is not entitled to participate in the discussion of a matter or to vote on a question in respect of a matter because they have a direct or indirect pecuniary interest or another interest that constitutes a conflict of interest, the member must declare this and state in general terms the reason why the member considers this to be the case. So you don't need to go into detail, but you must please declare that you have a conflict, why you believe this to be the case, and then go the other side of that closed door.
Travis Fair, I believe I have a conflict as I'm a member of the board of both of these organizations and may have a pecuniary interest through my business.
That might be a conflict. We'll see you later. We hope we don't forget you.
It sounds like there's some potential in that.
It has been known to happen in the past, just saying. Okay.
Okay, same drill here. We have two items before us, and any questions I would be happy to answer to the best of my ability.
And anybody have any questions? Councillor Christofferson.
It's sort of a question and sort of a request. With the Merritt Mountain Bike Society, they did a very good job of providing a map and showing the trail that they would like to develop, especially for younger members of the community, and I'm all in favor of that, anything that gets the kids out on exercise. But I would like to somehow get a request across to the Mountain Biking Society that I notice on the trails that were provided that it's not the main trail, but it's the return trail. Cuts through an area that there's a lot of pedestrians that use that area on a daily basis. And so my concern would be that motorbikes are up there as well, but you can hear them coming along. The wonderful thing about bicycles is that they're silent. But that can cause a problem if a pedestrian doesn't realize that a bike is coming up behind them. So I don't know whether the club is planning on a trail that's beside the existing walking trail, or if somehow there can be advice given to the kids that are, it's largely young kids, I think, that are going to be using the trail, to be safety conscious, because there are a lot of pedestrians that either are out by themselves or walking their dogs, or babysitting groups go through there and so on. So it's just a concern that I would like passed along. The trail itself, I think, is excellent.
Thank you, Councillor Christofferson, through the mayor. Yeah, I can certainly relay that to the Merritt Mountain Bike Association in terms of aligning that trail. I know there was some fairly extensive discussion on where exactly that trail should go, and how to how to keep it a mountain bike trail in a known multi-use area that does include dirt bikes. So how to keep a mountain bike trail with dirt bikes off and not interfere with the walkers on that trail, and that was a part of their discussion with that trail. So with the return trail specifically, I will raise that concern, and there's quite a bit of room up there. So if they're clearing a trail from fairly scratch, I'm sure it can be easily realigned.
In the map, it looked like it followed the walking trail pretty much exactly. I'm really familiar with the area up there and Googled it as well, and it looked like it was overlaying the walking trail. Nothing's official up there, but there's lots of tracks.
Thank you.
And as I have a question for staff that may not even, you may not know this at this point, but we are looking at getting a master plan for the North Benchlands to include some of these trails. Are these trails in the right spot for our new plan that we haven't really planned yet?
What I can say
Mr.
is,
Smith.
I think the general intent, and again, this is 100% subject to change and further community input, so please accept that caveat when I say it. Trails are going to be a really key component of anything that happens in that area. I can't say that enough. Whether it's trails in the exact same location, I have no intent to make that assertion right now, because when it comes down to it, there's a whole development plan that would need to happen, and integration and making sure that we can preserve or create a new trails where that can't be done is something that would absolutely be considered. So whether it's the exact spots, don't know, but it's not the end
And
of the
we're
world
talking
either.
5 to 10 years down the road anyways for some of this to even get started, so there's lots of room in there for changes. Okay, thank you. Just to mention those little kids the daycare kids, the babysat kids are daycares from around the area. So they are little kids on that trail, and there's lots of them. Lots of little kids. Yeah. So same kind of thing here. Any other comments? Then we are ready to have a mover that council approve the grant in aid request listed in category B on the attached schedule A in the type, amount, and payment timing indicated on the spreadsheet. Seconder? And no discussion, so all in favor? Opposed? Councillor White, were you in favor? Yes. Okay, thank you. I didn't see your hand. It must be a last minute. Oh, well, there you are.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Now we have section C and another conflict. Councillor Christopherson?
Your Worship, I'm a director on the Merritt Country Christmas Committee, so I will ask to be excused.
Okay. Same thing goes if you're out there for too long. You may need a knock on the door.
It's the person under D I'm worried about.
Yeah, I'm getting to that one, but I have to keep repeating this every time. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Category C is Merritt Country Christmas. From what I've gathered looking through the records, this is a reoccurring request every year. There was obviously some complications with how it went and occurred this year, but they're hoping to come back with a bang in 2021 and are looking for some funding for it.
Any questions for Mr. Strang? Doesn't look like any. Okay, any debate amongst ourselves? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay, do you want to?
I'll declare a possible conflict on the next one as I'm a director of the Nicola Valley Community Future, so I will recluse myself.
Thank you. Can you shut your mic off, please? Thank you. Turn your mic off. We hope we don't forget you, that you're the last one to go out. Oh, sure.
Thank you. This one, the last one on the slate, was a fairly interesting one. They are looking at doing a nonprofit community engagement fair, so inviting a bunch of 40 to 45 nonprofits to kind of meet, network, and get more engaged in the community. And they were looking for a donation in kind, i.e. rental of the room space to be able to hold the event.
And any questions for Mr. Strang? No? Okay, I need a mover. That council approve the grant and aid request listed in category D on the attached Schedule A in the type, amount, and payment timing indicated on the spreadsheet. Seconder? Okay, and any questions for Mr. Strang? Oh, we already had that. Any comments to each other? And all in favor? Opposed? Carried.
This is when you know you're getting closer to the end of the night.
Okay. Notices of motion. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll wait for, see, I did it again. Sorry, Councillor.
One more, sorry, we have one more recommendation on this. Because there is an additional, I forget what the amount was here, 4,000. Yeah, I knew, Adam would know. Yeah, so there was an excess amount from the $40,000 that was carried over in the budget. There's an excess amount, kind of, we talked about it at the beginning of the meeting. Staff recommendation is to move the remaining funds to council contingency in case other grant and aid type things came up towards the end of the year that council elected to move the funds on.
Otherwise known as extraordinary.
I believe
Requests?
there was an extraordinary request that I saw from last year. Yes, there's a form and a template for that.
Okay. Could we have a mover? And a seconder? Okay. And Mr. Lois, did you get that? Did you get the motion down?
It was pre-done. It's on the screen right now.
Oh, is that? Oh. So that council move any remaining funds in the grant and aid provision of the 2021 draft budget to council contingency to provide funding for other requests that may come up during the year. It was moved and seconded. Council Christopherson.
In previous years, there was a little bit of concern about going through the grant process and then doing it throughout the year and so on. But I think in recognition that this past year has been so different, and there's still a lot of unknowns for this coming year. Who knows which of the activities we may have already approved will still continue to go on and so on. So I'm very much in favor of having this as a contingency to address what may come up, largely because it's so many unknowns. In the future, I would hope we wouldn't have to think that way, but for the present time, I'm very much in favor of it. So, thank you.
And I was going to say there are also some unexpected things that come up, and if the organization doesn't jump on it at the last minute, and sometimes they just need a little bit of help to get it going. So I like that category, but not to be used by the same organization just because they haven't applied by the deadline. I hear you. So any more, we're in the middle of this motion. Any more comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Approved, opposed, none, carried. Reports from council. Councillor Etchart.
I just thought I would share with everyone who hasn't already seen that the food bank is going to be hosting the coldest night of the year, and it's to fundraise for the vulnerable population. And being a member of the food bank board, it's something that they're trying to promote, and so people can get involved by doing their walks and also donating. So I think it's cnoy.org on the internet, but there's information available. There was a post on Facebook and different spots as well. But I'd encourage people to get involved. And
What was that website again?
cnoy.org, I believe it is. Coldest night, Charlie November, Oscar Yankee.
Okay.
.org, yeah.
Thanks. Anybody
Can't hear
else?
anything with the mask. It's hard to.
It's kind of an age thing too.
Speak loud.
Councillor Love.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. A couple of weeks ago, when we were discussing a couple of new developments, I had made some comments about, in regards to the developments, about property assessments being affected by new buildings and that there. And somebody called me out on throwing some numbers out, and I did make a mistake. The numbers are wrong, so I want to just admit that. However, so I think I used the words, all the area had gone up 30%, and that's terrible. I don't usually do that. I said about average is the wording I like to use, so I did that. So I went back and corrected some of the numbers that I had been using. I just used some sample properties to give me an idea of what we're looking at. And just so you know, over that same period of time, they didn't go up 30%. In a 3-year period, in a 2-year period, they actually went up between 27 and 37%. In some of from 2018 to 2021. In the 2-year period, they went up from about 16% to 28%. And if you just look at the 1-year period, they were up to 7 or 10%. And that same period of time over those 3 years, average property assessments went up 27%, 9% a year for the last 3 years, which is really strange, I thought. But anyway, so I was out a little bit on my numbers, and I apologize for that. I try to correct that as best as I can. And these are averages, they're about, and samples. It wasn't everybody that went up there, so I just want to make that correction. But the point that I wanted to make is that when I was putting those numbers out, the real point is that when we look at new developments, we look at affordable house developments in areas like that, they do not have a negative impact on assessments for the area. So I just wanted to make that point clear. So I just want to correct those. Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me that time.
Thank you. And
Scratch my mic.
anyone else? Seeing no other council reports, we'll go on to information items. And this seems to be a letter from Fortis, just looking at an information session mainly, held on February 18th, 1 p.m. So to find out what they've already stated in the letter. So there you are. I'll let you do with it what you want. Closed session. We need a mover and a seconder that the meeting be closed to the public under Community Charter Section 91C, Labor Relations or Other Employee Relations, and E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements, if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality. Second? Okay, and all in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. So we are now into closed session. And we'll take a 5-minute break.